All right. Well, welcome those of you who've been patiently waiting for us to open this up. You will notice that Adam Schiff looks very different right now. Uh, Adam is doing, I think, triple duty promoting Proposition 50, and I was actually on a Zoom. He just was finishing about Prop 50, so he's on his way. But we thought we'd go ahead and open up the webinar. And so I'm Corley Phillips, the chairman of Sierra Forward. Les Francis is the executive director, and that is not Adam Schiff. That is Eddie, who is filling in until Adam Schiff can sit there. You will notice at the bottom of your screen that there is a Q&A clicker right next to the button, at least my screen says share, it says Q&A. That's how we're going to, you will submit questions. So you're not going to be asking questions live. We won't have time to answer all the questions. I'm going to try to see if there's a common thread where a number of questions on the same topic and then post that topic. Senator Schiff is planning to focus on three topics in his opening remarks. One, of course, is Proposition 50. The second is this status of government shutdown, and the third is the War Powers Act and the sort of extrajudicial killings that are going on in the Caribbean right now. So those are the three main topics that he'll touch on in his remarks. But questions can be more wide-ranging than that. We're getting down to the wire on Prop 50, and what you want to do when you're campaigning is to be a little behind. The good news is we're a little ahead, but that doesn't mean we want to lit up at all. And that's for two reasons. One is if enough people lit up, you might not get the results you want. But the bigger reason is California needs to send a message. So we want this to be an overwhelming vote. And just to reiterate the position that Sierra Forward has taken on this, the leadership team, unanimously agrees that independent commissions are the way to go in terms of setting congressional boundaries. And we think it should be the law of the land, but it's not. And as to quote Senator Schiff from the last Zoom I was on, if we're playing by one set of rules and the other side is playing different rules, we're not going to win that way. And the thing that we like about Prop 50 is it is a temporary measure. It goes upon the next census, we go back to having an independent commission, which is the way we think elections should be run. Unfortunately, Texas doesn't agree with that, and North Carolina doesn't agree with that, and Missouri doesn't agree with that, and all three of those states have gerrymandered in the middle of a decade, which is highly unusual, to try to carve out more Republican seats. And a number of other states are considering such a move, although it's getting later and later in the process to be able to do that. But Ohio the legislature is considering that, and Florida is talking about it, and Indiana. So there are other Republican-held states that are considering similar moves. So we think it's important for California to send a strong message that at least here in California, if we can't play by the rules, we need to respond in kind. And there is Senator Schiff. Thank you for joining us. We're going to I'm going to turn this over to Les. Les is going to introduce Senator Schiff, and then Senator Schiff's got a few remarks before we get into the Q&A. So take it away, Les.
All right, thanks, Corley, and good evening, Senator. Good to see you. Let me just quickly introduce the senator who really needs no introduction. As most people know, he's grew up in California, was born in Framingham, Massachusetts, went to school in Contra Costa County, undergraduate at Stanford, Harvard Law School, um, and U.S. attorney, prosecuting attorney in the Central District, California. As I was reading his biography, I realized we actually have two things in common. Well, we have one thing in common. That is, he ran unsuccessfully for the state assembly, as did I. He then went on to do great things, and I was never heard from again. But he then was elected to the state senate and then to Congress in 2000. I also noted that in his last election, he defeated um, a drag queen by the name of Maybe a Girl, who got 29% of the vote, which shows how far the Trump people will go to oppose Senator Schiff. Uh, I am a great admirer of the senator, and I have told him that one of the things I admire most about him is his capacity for outrage. That he speaks the truth, he speaks it plainly, and he takes on the tough issues and shows all the evidence of the kind of leadership we need in this country. So what we're going to do is, senators. Let me just also note that Sierra Forward was one of the first, if not the first, organization to endorse Adam Schiff for the Senate when he ran in 2024 in the primaries, and we've been proud to have been an early and constant supporter. So the senator is going to talk for a few minutes about key issues, and then, as Corley indicated, Corley will ask some questions. So, Senator, I'm going to turn it over to you with great gratitude and pride to be among your friends and supporters.
Well, Les, thank you very much. And Corley, thank you both for inviting me. Thank you for your leadership in getting this amazing organization started. Thank you for your very early support in my Senate race. You were one of the very first, if not the first organizations to endorse me, and I'm very, very grateful. You represent wonderful, wonderful people, a beautiful, gorgeous part of the state of California, which is my great pleasure to visit and look forward to having a meeting like this in person. I hope sometime in the near future, but privileged to join you even by Zoom. One of the things I love about my job is I travel all over California. I meet the most amazing people. I see the most incredibly beautiful scenery and environments anywhere in the country. And I love that. I requested to be assigned to the Agriculture Committee, which I've been very much enjoying, and it's taken to me some very deep red parts of the state. And there's nothing more fun as an elected official, I have to tell you, than upsetting people's expectations. And I was in Butte County a few months ago, meeting with the Farm Bureau there. And these are folks who, by and large, I think only know me from Fox News, which is not a terribly flattering portrait. So they were a little skeptical in the beginning, but when I explained my service on the Ag Committee and my desire to represent them and represent them well, what I was hearing in terms of tariffs and immigration raids and water issues and regulatory issues, they warmed up considerably. I knew I made progress when at the end of the meeting, one of the farmers turned to me and said, "I don't know why the president calls you watermelon head. You've got a perfectly normal sized head." So that's when I could tell I was making real progress. But I love that part of my job. I love representing all of this amazing state. And at the same time, the administration is a total nightmare, and the harms are multiplying, and they're serious, and it's what brings us here tonight to talk about. We have an election coming up with a proposition, Prop 50, that is integral to the fight to preserve our democracy. I say that because the Republicans and the president know what deep trouble they are in the midterms. Their policies are deeply unpopular. Raising health insurance costs, separating people from their health insurance, cutting food assistance benefits, the abundant graft, the indiscriminate, chaotic use of the military in our cities, the abuse of the Justice Department, the rampant corruption, deeply, deeply unpopular agenda with the American people. And Trump knows that he will lose the midterms unless he can somehow rewrite the rules and rewrite the lines. And because of that, we have to go back to the polls ourselves in California and make sure there's a level playing field. I hope what comes out of this in the end is an effort to pass a national redistricting reform that outlaws the gerrymander in every state of the union. That is a bill that I have supported for years and sponsored. It is one we've gotten no Republican support for. But just maybe, once we get through these redistricting wars and we flip the House and I hope flip the Senate, and things are looking up in the Senate, then we can finally pass that national redistricting reform and make sure that every state has free and fair elections and that voters get to choose their representatives instead of the other way around. But that's just a little bit on the election coming up. Of course, we have more immediate elections in addition to Prop 51 in Virginia and in New Jersey, where I think we're going to win both of those big races, and I hope by a good margin. If we do, that will definitely put some wind in our sails. But a lot of challenges facing the country. Let me just touch on the shutdown and the abuse of the war powers, and then we'll go to your questions and thoughts on things. So in terms of the shutdown, Democrats have been remarkably cohesive. I hope that cohesion stays and persists as long as it's necessary. We have rallied around a pretty simple message, which is we cannot price people out of the health insurance market like Republicans are trying to do. In this budget fight, we want money in the budget for healthcare. We want money in the budget for tax credits that have been taken away that will allow people to afford their health insurance. Otherwise, a median family of four in many cities in California are going to see their premiums go up by hundreds of dollars a month or $1,000 a month, something that's just unsustainable. So we're fighting to preserve healthcare access. We're also fighting to make sure that in any agreement that we reach, there's a real mechanism, not just a promise, a real mechanism that will enforce the agreement. That is, money we agree on will get spent. Because what the Republicans are doing is they're rescinding Democratic funding, they are illegally impounding Democratic funding, and they're telling us, even as they're negotiating with us, we're going to cheat on the deal. Whatever you agree to, we are going to cheat on. So you can agree to the CR that we keep putting forward, but let me just tell you, we intend to cheat on it. We intend to rescind the funding for Democratic constituents. So we also need more than broken promises. So this is a little bit about where we are at this moment. Republicans are feeling, I think, the pressure of people getting those notices in the mail. But there's a lot of hardship going around to federal employees, to people on food assistance. And the sooner the president comes to the table, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But thanks for having me on, and I look forward to our conversation. Oh, let me just touch on the war powers. So I think the administration announced they attacked 4 more ships just within the last 24 to 48 hours. Brings the number of those killed, I think, close to or in excess of 50 people. This is plainly unlawful, plainly unconstitutional. There's been no declaration of war. There's been no authorization to use force. Whether someone is engaged in drug trafficking or not, you do not have the unilateral right as president to say, I'm just going to kill them. And I offered a war powers resolution 3 weeks ago. We came within a couple votes of getting it passed. We had a couple Republicans vote with us. Tim Kaine and I and Rand Paul are offering it again. It could come up as soon as later this week or next week as the president sends ships closer to Venezuela and threatens to strike Venezuela itself and not just ships emanating from Venezuela or Colombia. I think support will only grow for this resolution. I just hope that it's in time. So that's a little bit on the abuse of the war powers and use of the military, and I look forward to our conversation.
Okay, great. So I'm going to read this first question because it got submitted by email ahead of time. This is from a guy that we have done some work with, Rich McIntyre from the Community Governance Partnership. The role of civil disobedience in American history is clear. Without hundreds of thousands in the streets and thousands being willing to go to jail, the Civil Rights Act would not have passed and the Vietnam War would have continued. Those of us who were there remember. My question is, with a government that sees dissent as provocation and seeks to crush it, can civil disobedience still have a defining role in America?
Well, that's a very good and difficult question, particularly because we have an administration that is seeking to create a provocation, seeking to stir up, inflame the situation in cities throughout America. And so what we have been urging people is not to give them the pretext. Don't give them the pretext to invoke the Insurrection Act. Don't give them the pretext to deploy the military to an even greater degree. I do think that given the trajectory that we are on, given the amplification of the harms every day, we're 9 months into this, 10 months into this. Where will we be in 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years from now? It is entirely possible that it'll be necessary to do things that we've only seen in European and other countries, like a general strike. I think it is unclear where this is all heading and what the best tools will be. I think we are starting out in exactly the right way, which is taking to the streets in massive numbers, as we did on No King's Day, to make sure that our voices are heard, making sure that those efforts of protest are peaceful, that we don't give the administration a pretext to do further harm. We're using litigation very successfully. Now, the Supreme Court is allowing some of those harms to continue as these lawsuits work their way through the courts, but even a delay in the harms is valuable. So I think what our focus should be right now is how do we mitigate the harms every day? What actions can we take to mitigate the harms? I'm proud that in Chicago, they have learned from what we experienced in Los Angeles. You have people delivering food, delivering meals to immigrant households like we did during the pandemic, so that parents don't risk arrest going to the store, don't risk separation from their kids when they go to the store. We are having parents drive immigrant children to school so their parents don't risk getting arrested on the way to school. Communities are coming together to support each other, and I think we need to do a lot more of that. These are the steps that I would advocate we take, but it is entirely possible that even bigger, broader steps may be necessary in the future, like a general strike.
Great. I guess a little follow-up. Surely, I mean, I don't know if you have a chance to talk to your Republican colleagues in private, but they must privately acknowledge the strength of these No King's Day rallies. Although, you know, Mike Johnson said that anybody doing that hated America, which as somebody that did those, I resented that remark because I love America. I just hate what Mike Johnson's doing to it. So, do you think there's any recognition of that this is a legitimate discontent, and do you think you foresee any Republican adjustment to that as a consequence?
Well, Corley, I agree with you completely. This effort to cast anyone who's in opposition to the president and his agenda, anyone who's willing to defend the Constitution against the lawlessness of this regime, as somehow hating America, or being a domestic terrorist or an enemy within, is just scandalous, dangerous, and exactly the kind of rhetoric they're using. It's just so destructive, but they could care less, and so they continue it. And Johnson has proven to be the most enfeebled, spineless enabler of the president in the Congress. He has near peer competition in the Senate and also with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. But I think those massive demonstrations are incredibly important, and they're important both to let the president and those around him know that there are millions and millions of Americans who vehemently disagree with what they're doing, and This is a president who, if nothing else, cares about crowd size. So the fact that the largest demonstrations in our history have been against him has an impact. It also shows a degree of organization in the opposition that should cause the Republicans great concern, because we saw that kind of organic demonstration during Trump 1 with those Million Mom marches and the incredible grassroots organizations that sprung up to push back and help us to victory in the midterms. These expressions of opposition are hugely important. In terms of Republicans, what they say privately, they are aware, all but a small handful of true believers, of the enormous harms that are being done to the country by this president and the enormous harms that are being done to their party. I had a number of conversations with Republicans around my War Powers resolution. I remember, for example, one of them telling me that it's not just that they have to be concerned about personal retribution against them, which can take the form of a MAGA primary or ginning up the MAGA base to result in personal threats to members, but they also are concerned that he will punish their entire state if they stand up to him. And of course, the president is petty enough to do exactly that. They will also, I think, endlessly rationalize what they do with the argument that if they don't do it, they'll be replaced by someone who we will like even less. So they will, I think, by way of rationalization, say, well, if I don't vote for Hegseth because he's a sexual predator, I will be primaried and you will get someone worse. If I don't vote for RFK Jr., I will lose and you'll get someone worse. And my own view, although I don't express it quite this bluntly, is I'm not sure there could be someone worse. I mean, if you're going to vote exactly the way the president wants, then what difference is there? Your private misgivings compared to someone who has no private misgivings don't give me a whole lot of solace. Now, here's the thing. Earlier tonight, Tim Kaine offered a resolution to end the emergency that the president is using to sanction Brazil. And in case you're not tracking this, the president put 50% tariffs on Brazil for one singular reason, which is that Brazil successfully prosecuted their insurrectionist in chief, Bolsonaro. So the mini Trump in Brazil was prosecuted for doing the same thing Donald Trump was, except he was prosecuted successfully. And so Trump is trying to export insurrection by saying to Brazil, unless you let Bolsonaro free, unless you drop the charges, give clemency to my MAGA mini-me in Brazil, I'm going to sanction your whole economy. Well, tonight we had enough Republicans to vote to overturn that. Now, it's not going to be overturned in the House, and it certainly wouldn't have a veto-proof majority, but sending a message that there's a number of Republicans now willing to go on record in opposition to the president is important. It is a small beginning, and it is a sign of at least some life in the Republican Party that is not completely in his thrall.
Going to shift gears a little bit. We've had a number of questions about the Democratic leadership and essentially sort of asking where's the dynamicism that is needed. Lynn Marks said that it feels to her like Congress, other than maybe AOC and Bernie, have been too quiet. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I know it's the perception among many in our party that the Democratic caucus, Democratic elected officials, aren't fighting hard enough, aren't speaking out enough, aren't doing enough. They don't hear us. They don't know what we're doing. I can tell you personally that I fight this guy every day of the week, every hour of the day, it feels like. It would be hard for me to imagine fighting harder to protect our democracy. And I'll give you one illustration of how I'm doing it. It's different than how Bernie's doing it. It's different than how AOC is doing it. But I had a Zoom like this with some supporters early in the Trump presidency, and they said to me, what we really need in the Democratic Party is someone who can, at the end of each day, tell us, this is what happened today that's significant. There's 50 million things happening every day. We need someone who can be a kind of national narrator and say, these are the things that happened. This is what really deserves your attention. This is what Democrats think about it. This is what we should think about it. And we went round and around with, okay, that sounds great. The example was given of, the kind of fireside chat that Andrew Cuomo would do each day during the pandemic. All right, who should do it? And then we had a discussion. Well, what about the chair of the party? Well, nobody knows the chair of the party. Well, what about such and such a Democratic leader? Well, no, they're too moderate or they're too progressive. Well, what about so and so? Well, they're running for president. And if it's them, the other people running for president won't support that idea that this is our spokesman. So we went round and around with, trying to figure out, okay, who should this person be? And then one of the people on the Zoom said, well, why don't you do it? And I have to say, for a moment, I was flummoxed. It's hard to, acknowledge a problem and then say, well, somebody else should try to solve that problem. So I kind of took it under advisement to think about, didn't say yes, didn't say no. And I decided that in my own little way, I was going to try to do what they were asking. And I decided that one of the reasons we lost the last election was not having a strong message, but also not communicating that a message in a way people were hearing. And the Republicans and Trump were bypassing traditional media altogether, and they were going directly to people via social media, by social media platforms, by podcasters, etc., because the traditional media was inconveniently fact-checking them and calling them liars. So they went around the mainstream media, but the result of our over-reliance on the mainstream media and commercial advertisements was that we didn't talk to lots of people that simply don't get their news that way. And the most used platform, and it is growing exponentially, is YouTube. Young people get their information on YouTube now. It's different than the other platforms like TikTok and Instagram where people are scrolling endlessly and not really watching. Those have their importance too, but YouTube people watch for long periods of time. And the way we used to watch Walter Cronkite, they watch YouTube. So I decided I'm going to invest in my time in YouTube. I had at the start, after 24 years in the House, about 24,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, which was large for a House member, but by the bigger scheme of things, not very large. So I started doing nightly videos. And within a few weeks, we went from 24,000 to about 70,000. And I was at a restaurant and had someone come up to me and say, oh, Senator, I want you to know I really like your show. And I'd only been doing this for 2 or 3 weeks, and I wasn't really sure what he meant by that. I thought for sure he meant he'd seen me on a show. He'd seen me on Lawrence O'Donnell or on CNN or whatever. But I was just curious enough to ask. So I said, thank you, but what show are you referring to? And he looked at me somewhat perplexed and he said, your show on YouTube. And I thought to myself, son of a bitch, I have a show. And, each night we're in session and many nights when we're not, I do a video, generally a straight to camera video, explaining something significant. And we have grown now in subscribership well beyond where AOC is. We are approaching Bernie-like numbers. We have over 500,000 people who subscribe to my channel, which is about the size of a kind of a moderately successful show on CNN or MSNBC. So this is one way that I am communicating with people that you may not be hearing because you're not subscribing to YouTube. You're not, or if you are, then you're looking at different things. But I can tell you how hard we are working to fight this corrupt administration. In terms of the leadership, I totally get the hunger for young leadership, for charismatic leadership. There are a lot of up-and-coming young charismatic leaders in the party. We certainly will have a generational change in our leadership the way the House did. I can't tell you when that's going to take place, but there are a lot of really talented people working every day and every night to try to fight what's going on. I'm holding shadow hearings. I'm using all these digital means of communication. I'm going on all the mainstream shows as well. I'm speaking round the clock hours on the Senate floor, doing town halls, doing Zooms, doing everything I can to push back, to fight back. And while you may not be hearing it, I can assure you there is someone at 1600 Pennsylvania who's hearing it because he threatens me almost every week. And one thing I've learned about Donald Trump is he only goes after people he fears are effective in standing up to him. So I think by that measure, I'm doing pretty damn well.
The shift gears again. The government's shut down right now, but Congress gets paid out of a different pot of money. What's your view on congressmen and senators continuing to get paid while government employees are not?
Well, I'm going to speak for myself because I don't want to speak to what other senators and House members do. I told the Senate administration to withhold my pay until employees got paid. I didn't want to get paid if my staff wasn't getting paid or if other workers weren't getting paid. So I'm not getting paid. That is a decision each member needs to make for themselves. I think as a constitutional matter, because you can't change a congressional salary in the middle of a term, you can't change the law to withhold member pay during a shutdown. And even if you could, it may not be a good idea if basically you're dealing with an administration that is made up of billionaires and dealing with an opposition party that is very wealthy and its members are very wealthy, in which the longer the shutdown goes on, they have additional leverage over the Democratic caucus. Anyway, but I'm doing what I can do to be a good example.
Well, thank you for that. And there were a number of questions about what's going on in Gaza. There's numerous organizations have basically called it genocide. And yet the United States government continues to support Israel. Why don't you speak to that issue?
Yeah. Well, first of all, what's happened in Gaza, what happened to Israel on October 7th, what's happened to Israelis and to Palestinians has been a terrible trauma and a horror show for more than the last 2 years. I just organized a effort within the Democratic caucus to try to prevent it from being made worse by writing a letter that was adopted by every member of the Democratic caucus, from Bernie Sanders to myself to Jackie Rosen and others on the much more conservative side of the Israel spectrum, had everyone except Fetterman in the Democratic caucus to support an effort by the administration to prevent the annexation of the West Bank. And it was significant because I don't think we've ever had such a broadly supported effort within the Democratic caucus that was in contradiction to the policies of an Israeli government as the effort I just organized. Now, in August, I organized a different effort that got 44 of our Democratic members on board, which was almost all of us. That was calling for immediate humanitarian assistance into Gaza, calling for an end to, obviously, to the continued captivity of the hostages, but also calling for a surge of humanitarian assistance. So I've been very active in trying to organize the Democratic caucus to provide a unified front. In particular, am appalled at the level of hunger and starvation in Gaza, and as well, just horrified by what the families of the hostages and those that were raped, murdered, and tortured on and after October 7th. So I'm going to continue to speak out about it. No one gets a free pass. And in terms of military support for Israel, I want to make sure that Israel can defend itself, not just in terms of Hamas, but in terms of Hezbollah, the Houthis, Iran. But I am not willing to give a blank check either. And so I will continue to evaluate um, uh, all of the circumstances and make the decision that I think is best to address the humanitarian crisis, but also to address the legitimate security needs of Israel. And I would have said a couple of weeks ago to make sure the hostages are released. We still need the deceased hostages returned to their families, and I'll continue to press to make that happen as well.
Really?
Yeah, go ahead, Les.
Senator, I have well, two things. One, I don't qualify as a young person, which you probably know already, but I do watch your YouTube segment every night, and I urge other people to do so. It's really good. It's very well done, and it's informative, and it's helpful to sort of sort through all the chaos. So I commend you for doing that. I have a different question. Today's Atlantic magazine, and you may have not had a chance to see their daily releases, but they go into some detail about the threats to the 2026 election and what the Trump administration and his allies may have in mind to disrupt it, discredit it, so forth. Frightening stuff, actually. And my question is, are the Democrats, A, uh, figuring out a way to counter that? I mean, are we going to have lawyers and staff and poll watchers and all the rest of it, the sort of routine stuff, but early on calling attention to the threat, which seems to be real? I mean, this does not seem to be a far-fetched prospect. Do you have any thoughts or insights into that?
Yeah, now, unless I don't know whether you're referring to, there was a really powerful piece by Michael Luddig. I think it was in the Atlantic,
Yeah.
with a kind of provocative headline about, whether Trump was going to be king for life, or president for life. It was a very powerful chronicle of all of the institution destroying, democracy destroying conduct of the last 9 months. And this is written by a very deeply conservative legal scholar and former judge. We are doing a lot of thinking and acting when it comes to protecting the elections in the midterms, when it comes to looking forward to the next presidential election. All of the traditional things that you're describing. And for example, when the Justice Department and Pam Bondi say they're sending monitors to California and New Jersey to monitor the election. Of course, our suspicion is they're being sent to suppress turnout in the election. We take steps like Rob Bonta announced that we're going to have monitors monitoring their monitors to make sure that they're not engaged in the illegal suppression of votes. So we will act proactively. We will also act in response to what the Republicans do. And we will use litigation. We'll use every tool we can. I want to be clear, though, there is no magical legislative remedy here. We don't have a majority in either house. Republicans have been utterly sycophantic and unwilling to uphold their constitutional responsibilities. So there's no legislative remedy to point to say, okay, we can make it stop if they try to steal the election. But we are going to do everything humanly possible to prevent it, to take action, to push back, counteract any step that they take. But I will say this, and I think this is really important. Part of what they hope in saying that Donald Trump is going to run for president again, part of what they hope in announcing these efforts to suppress the vote is they hope to send Democrats and the Democratic Party into such a despair over whether there will even be a free and fair election, so as to discourage, suppress Democratic efforts to win that election. And we cannot let the fear of unlawful and unconstitutional actions in an election deter us from making sure that we do everything to win that election. Indeed, the best election protection is winning by the biggest margin possible. So even as we prepare, even as we adjust, even as we deploy lawyers and others, we cannot allow ourselves the paralysis that comes with despair. There's nothing they would like more. So when it comes to the election coming up, let's make sure everybody returns those ballots. Let's make sure that we do anything and everything to overcome any suppression efforts, because we need these midterms, as we do the presidential election that will follow them, to put our country back on a democratic path.
Thank you. Oh, Crowley, you're muted.
Thank you. I want to be mindful of your time, so I'm going to ask one final question. It's kind of a follow-up to that, but hopefully ends us on a hopeful note. This is from Josh Molo. If Democrats regain control of the House and/or Senate in 2026, what do you believe would be the most immediate effective actions a Democratic majority in one of those two chambers could take to provide a strong and constructive check on the Trump administration?
Well, I think the most important steps that we will be able to take are the steps that stop further harms, and stop those harms from multiplying. We will have the ability to cut off funding for lawless activity. They will need Congress to fund the government, and we will have much, much greater leverage in that, where we will be negotiating against the president, and we won't be doing it with a supine Republican majority prepared to give him everything he wants. We will, even by the most optimistic assessments, not have the kind of majorities that would be sufficient to overturn a presidential veto. So the idea that we're going to be able to pass a lot of affirmative legislation that the president would sign or that we could override his veto is probably not at all realistic. But we can certainly do a great deal to stop the harms, to insist in a negotiation on doing things that affirmatively protect our democracy and our constituents. We will have much, much greater leverage to do that. So, for example, putting an end to the Trump abuse of the military. We can insist in our negotiations over things like the budget that there be new protections against deploying the military, that there are greater constraints on how military dollars can be spent. We can do really powerful oversight. What happened to the $50,000 that Tom Homan, the White House border czar, took in a paper bag? What happened to the money? Why was that case dismissed by the Justice Department? We can subpoena these officials. We can haul them in. We can expose the rampant corruption. ICE has got $170 billion. DHS is $170 billion. Millions and millions and millions of dollars are going to be wasted and already are on sole source contracts to cronies of the president and his friends, on expensive aircraft, on a whole host of things. So the oversight role will be supercharged when we take back the majority, and that can be powerful. So those are some of the things we can do. Now, when we have the trifecta, when we take back the White House and we control the House and Senate, we need to do something that we should have done in the first weeks of the Biden administration and failed to do. And by the way, I will tell you, this was what I was advocating at the time. And that is, we damn well better pass voting rights legislation and an end to the gerrymander, national redistricting reform. If we haven't done it by then, we need to do it then. I remember saying at the time that in terms of redistricting reform and voting rights, that if Mitch McConnell, when he was majority leader, controlled the Senate and Republicans controlled the House and they controlled the White House and they believed that something was existential to the country or their party, they would have found a way to get it done. And we didn't, and we should have, and that is on us. And it would have required us to overcome the filibuster, but they're overcoming the filibuster whenever they want to. So we cannot make that mistake again. And those are the kind of things I would do. Now, to end on another further optimistic note, I just want to underscore something I think is important for us to keep in mind. We're going to get through this. We are a deeply resilient country. We have amazing, beautiful, wonderful people in every state in the union, in every part of every state. This too shall pass. But what we do right now is going to determine how much damage we suffer in the meantime, how many lives are so deeply adversely impacted. It is up to all of us every day to figure out how we mitigate the harms. But we're going to get through this. I have every confidence we're going to get through this, that we will look back on these times with some degree of astonishment. And how the hell did that guy ever become president of the United States twice? What on earth was the country thinking? And to get to that point, we're going to have to solve an economic problem that we did not address, not fully by any means. They're certainly not addressing, and that is that the problem today in America is not that people are out of work. Unemployment is still low, although it is climbing. The problem today is that people are working, and they still can barely get by. And all too many millions are failing, and all too many millions more see the quality of life as less, their quality of life is less than what their parents had, and see the future for their kids and see even less. And when that happens, and this is the first time in our history that that's happened, all too many millions of people are ready to turn to any dictator who says that he alone can fix it. We are not going to save our democracy unless we make an economy that works for everyone. This is, I think, why Bernie and AOC and others have such traction, because they're speaking to that fundamental challenge, and that is an economy that's not working for millions of people, a inequality in wealth that has reached historic and unsustainable levels, in which a handful of families have the combined wealth of half the country. So that has to be fixed. It has to be fixed by things that are not incremental. There's no patience for incrementalism when people are feeling they're at risk of failing. So this is our challenge. When we take back power, we damn well need to fix this. And on the way back to power, we need to have solutions as to how we will fix it. It may be enough to flip the House on the strength of how terrible a job Trump is doing. Maybe it's even possible to flip the Senate, although I think in the absence of a strong, powerful agenda and a message that amplifies that agenda, that will be difficult. But we will not win the White House back unless we have a powerful, positive agenda. So this is our challenge. I'm grateful to all of you that are doing the hard work of building our democracy in such a key part of our state. And thank you for having me on tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator, when we endorsed you in your race for Senate, we said then, and we believe still, that there was nobody that we had more confidence would work to protect our democracy than you. So thank you for your efforts on that and all that. And I'll just remind everybody, if you haven't voted for Prop 50, go vote yes on Prop 50, and make sure your friends and family are doing so, because we need to send a powerful message that we will not stand for, we will not sit idle while gerrymandering continues to take place. So. All right, with that, I'm going to bring it to a close. And thanks again, Senator Schiff, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.